That's mystical.
Okay, so
All right. Today we're going to be talking about the great flood stories from around the world. And I want to do this in a little different way than maybe you have heard before. I know what happens so often is they're going to go ahead and say, okay, so what we're going to go through is evidence for a worldwide flood. And then you're going to hear a whole bunch of statistics, and people will use all these primary sources to kind of fit a certain idea. And, I like to call that YouTube. You don't need to hear that. We're gonna go through, and you're going to realize yourself that there's connections between many of these flood stories. We're going to go through the flood stories one by one, and the first one you may have heard before, but I want you to pay attention to all the details of that flood story, because as we go through the next ones, you will see some very interesting and very unusual themes that are running across. If you are able to survive all the way to the very end, as I get through this, without me even adding too much, you will know very much how these flood stories are connected. Isn't that fun? Through primary sources. So you're going, and you'll be stuck with a certain conclusion, actually a series of conclusions about these flood stories and how they're transmitted. Now, so I'm going to start off by saying, do we know that these flood stories are true or not, evidential or not? And my answer to that is, you're just going to find out. I'm terrible. I got to keep it to the end. I mean, what am I doing here? Okay, so the first one, and you're going, oh, do we have to hear this one? Yeah, you have to hear this one, the Old Testament Hebrew Bible version. Please listen to all the details, because you're going to see that in a lot of the other flood stories, and not in ones that you would expect. I'm throwing you off already. Not in ones you would expect. Okay, so here we go. All right. And so in brief, you have the Judeo-Christian story. It runs that all of humanity was deemed as wicked except for one righteous man. And can you tell me who that righteous man is?
Noah.
That's right, Noah. Right. He was declared righteous, blameless in his generation, and walked with God. Okay, so what will happen is the world is considered evil. It's interesting because it mentions the fact that there were those known as the Nephilim, who were kind of hybrids between the angels and humans. And in fact, there's a phrase in Genesis that says, I hear somebody's speaker on. I'm not sure where it's coming from. So somebody mute here. So there is it says as follows, the Nephilim, these are hybrids between angels and humans, the story stating, now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then, of course, you're thinking, okay, so, and then, of course, the next line is, then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever. It goes into the fact that he is upset. He regretted that he made humans on earth. His heart was deeply troubled. He says, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I even made them. Okay, so obviously you're going to see that immediately you're going to connect the Nephilim idea with the fall and wickedness of man. I'm just going to throw something just to mess things up. Actually, the two ideas are separate. There's actually a break in the Hebrew. Anyway, so the ideas are not connected, although later on, those who are connected with Enoch will put those ideas together. So just kind of a little fun fact to throw out there. So the reason why there's a flood is that humans are not righteous. They are wicked. So this is going to be the great punishment, as we will know. Okay, so here we go. So what will happen is that because God decided to destroy the world by water. He gives Noah instructions for how to build the ark. And he is further told to bring 2 of every sort of animal. I want you to pay attention to that. Every time I say pay attention, you want to pay attention. Okay, so build an ark, right? 2 of every sort of animal, 2 of every sort, male and female. And of course, everything on dry land whose nostrils had the breath of life. With that said, when it comes to clean animals, it's not just pairs. They will have 7 of those. Okay, so now the depths open up, the rivers of the underworld open up, and the skies above, and yes, you're going to have this great flood. And this happens, it covers the earth for 150 days, right? And it's a long time, about 5 months. Then what happens, pay attention to this theme, the waters recede steadily from the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the water has gone down. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on a mountain of Ararat. So the next theme is, hey, all right, you have the ark and it lands on a mountain. You want to pay attention to that theme. The waters continued to recede until the 10th month. And on the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains became visible. After 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the ark. And pay attention to this. And he sent out a raven. Burn in your mind the word raven. Raven, 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 raven. Ravenclaw. Okay. Next thing, after that, so he sends out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. The dove couldn't find any place. Then he sent out another dove a little bit later, and of course he waited again, and this time it brought back a freshly plucked olive leaf, and then he sent out yet another dove, and it didn't come back at all. And so it's like, okay, things are good. It looks like there's dry land. Okay, so all the creatures, they were released, and at the very end, Noah makes an altar, and it says right here, then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. And the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood. Never again will I destroy all creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. And then, of course, you have this rainbow as a promise. You guys remember? And then, of course, you're going to have from Noah, you're going to have 3 tribes, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And this is the beginning. Okay, you survived. You survived. I see the pictures of you guys. You're still here. Sorry, we had to go through that narrative. You feel like I am in Sunday school again. Why am I here? I don't want to hear the story. Well, I do, because we're gonna go down a little journey here. Here we go. So that is the story. How many people have heard this story pretty thoroughly before? Raise your hands. Pretty thoroughly. Yeah. Okay. Mom, dad, church, popular culture. Let's move now over to Islam. Here we go. Islam has a story that is very similar, except in the Quran, Noah is known as Nuh, N-U-H, in Arabic. He is considered one of the 5 most important prophets of Islam, and he tried to tell people to be righteous, and they did not listen to him. And because of their unrighteousness, then, of course, Allah instructed him to build a boat. But in this case, not all of Noah's family is saved. His son, Canaan, drowned because of his disobedience. his unwillingness to be righteous. The ark is known as a safina, which is a typical boat that is made out of boards and nails. The ark, you'd have the same flood story going on there. And then after about 5 or 6 months, he sends out a raven. Yet the raven in this story, remember you had the raven being sent out first in the Old Testament story, the Hebrew Bible story. In this story, the raven is disobedient. And basically it is eating a carcass of a dead animal that is killed in the flood and begins to eat it. So what will happen is this Noah will curse the raven. Next, this Noah sends out a dove, which brought back signs of life. And eventually the ark gets stuck on the top of a mountain known as Mount Judi, Judi. And what will happen there is, if I think it's Mount Judi, where's Mount Judi today? Here's somebody's thing on. Mount Judi is near Mount Ararat in Turkey. It's on the same line. So apparently you have another contesting story. And you're thinking, okay, that's great. Yeah, but I would expect that the Hebrew Bible version and the Islamic version will be pretty similar. I mean, you got it. Okay, just to give you a taste of what's to happen, we're going to be going through Native American flood stories coming up. So just give you a little clue where we're going. We're going to be talking about Cambodian flood stories, Vietnamese flood stories. So this is why we're making sure we're getting these themes down. So hold on. Okay, you guys got it? Here we go. Okay, so now we move on to another source, and that is known, the Sumerian myths, and that is known as the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, the epic is a combination of early Sumerian poems in circulation since the third dynasty of Ur, that's 2150 to 2000 BCE, which, by the way, you got to remember the thought or perceived idea is that Abraham was originally from Ur. So let's understand that the Ur flood stories and the Abrahamic so-called flood stories, there could be some connections there. We also have to remember that the Hebrew Bible version of the story, hold on, nothing is fully written in the Hebrew Bible until we get to the Babylonian captivity in the 500s BCE. Okay, 500s BCE. That means that the earlier Jewish stories could be more, pardon the pun, fluid until it gets fully written down. But when we talk about the Mesopotamian stories, we have this written down, and it goes back very early. Okay, so third dynasty of Ur, and what will happen here is that the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's composed around the 18th or 17th century BCE. It is written in Akkadian. And we go through this, although the best preserved version of the Akkadian story is extant in 12 tablets. This version dates between 13,000 to 1000 BCE. However, a section of this Epic of Gilgamesh story, this version, concerning the flood, derives from an earlier 18th century BCE Akkadian epic, and it's known as the Atrahasis, Atrahassis, and we do have fragments of this earlier version. So I'm trying to say is the Epic of Gilgamesh, it did exist back in the 18th, 17th century BCE. The best versions we have is about 700-800 years later. We have fragments, but we also have fragments of another text that's slightly contemporaneous that, well, has some of the same features. So it looks like there are multiple flood stories, even within the Sumerian context, and they are copying one another. You guys got it? Okay, so let's keep on going here. In this earlier version, in this creation myth, three gods cast lots for dominion over the entire earth. Anu gets the sky. Enlil receives the earth, and Enki receives the sea. Now, because the lower gods rebel from their duties, they're supposed to make the earth productive, but these lower gods, they just don't want to do it. There's even some stories that talk about these lower gods doing mining exploits. Sounds like the Stargate story, right? So what happens is that they decide, well, I guess we're going to need humans. So Enki, the wise counselor of the gods, decides to make humankind through the mother goddess Mami, who then shapes clay figures mixed with flesh and blood of the slain god by the name of Kshitti. Yes, I said that right. Kshitti, who's the god who had intelligence, but a very interesting name. Yet the world is overwhelmed with people as time goes on, and Enlil tries to reduce the population through, guess what? Various famines. I'm going to wipe out people. It's not working. So the reason for we're going to see a flood is not so much having to do with the wickedness of humanity, but more like population control. We're expanding like rabbits, and so what happened is Enlil decides to destroy humanity with a flood. So what he does is that he makes a pact. See, the problem is that even though he made a pact of silence on the plan outlined by Enlil, the god Enki wishes to tell somebody from humanity, wishes to tell them that about this, so at least a remnant can be saved. But he did make a pact with Enlil that this flood story is a secret story. So how is he going to do that? Well, in this version of the flood story, he puts together a reed screen, and he talks to the righteous man. His name, as I said before, is Atrahasis, which means extremely wise, from Sharupa. He tells him through the reed veil, he says, dismantle your house and build an ark. And he does. He dismantles his house, and the ark was sealed with bitumen, and he was told to save both his family and all the animals. Well, this sounds kind of noetic to me, doesn't it? It's not. That there's a similarity here. After 7 days, the flood ends, and Atrahasis offers, guess what? A sacrifice to the gods. Okay, well, this is interesting. Well, now we get to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is another Sumerian story that incorporates elements from the earlier one. You guys follow so far? Now, this one is real close. In this story, we talked about Gilgamesh a couple of weeks ago, but this story, it is not Atrahasis, but this is Utnapishtim is the righteous man. And basically it goes is that you have Gilgamesh, and he goes through all these exploits because he's looking for immortality, and he and his best buddy Enkidu, and they defeat the sacred bull and go through all these adventures, but unfortunately his best buddy dies, and he hears that there's possibility of immortality through this guy, and that's Utnapishtim, and because Utnapishtim is the one man who had eternal life. And how did he gain this eternal life? And it was the fact that he was considered a righteous man. Now, this is interesting. It's like, well, so now you have another theme here. So the earlier Sumerian version is we're gonna drown out humanity because there's just too many of us. Okay. Now we're gonna have a combination in the Epic of Gilgamesh where we're gonna drown humanity because there's too many of us, but also we want to preserve the more righteous. So we're kind of combining the themes. We lose the overpopulation theme in the Old Testament version, but we're seeing kind of a hybrid between the two. Is this fascinating? So here we go. And it's even closer. So in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he describes the world as follows. It's very cramped. God Enlil heard the clamor of humanity. I got to tell you, these Mesopotamian gods, they really don't like people. They just don't. Uh, and there's some beautiful words. One time they describe humanity as crawling upon the ground like locusts. Doesn't that get you right here? Little locusts devouring the earth. It's almost like Smith from the Matrix. You know, we're an infection, we're a disease, right, to be eradicated. So in this case, Lel, he says, the uproar of mankind is intolerable, and sleep is no longer possible by reason of the babble. Okay, there's so many problems with this. I don't even want to start. I'll just say, first of all, why do gods need to sleep? What, you know, and then of course, second of all is like, why are we so noisy? I mean, we're that loud that they can hear us way up in the sky. So I don't know. It's like your very worst anal sensitive to noise neighbor. You know, it's like be quiet down there. We're trying to get some sleep up here. So what happens is that they decide to kill us. Isn't that nice? So, get the raid. In this case, it's going to be a flood to wash us out. However, there is another part, and that is Utnapishtim is still judged to be righteous in comparison to the others. So apparently, even though there's too many of us, we're not too righteous, but Utnapishtim is. And so a certain Ea, this god, decides that he's going to tell him in a dream as follows. Let her beam equal her length. Let her deck be roofed like a vault that covers the abyss. Then take up into the boat the seed of all living creatures. And so Utnapishtim is told to build an ark. And so the day arrived for the gods to unleash the rains. I'm actually reading parts of the epic right now. For 6 days and 6 nights, the winds blew, torrent and tempest, and floods overwhelmed the world. Tempest and flood raged together like warring hosts. And soon the surface of the sea stretched as flat as the rooftop. Eventually, you can see this happening. Guess what happens? The waters start to subside. And guess where the ark gets stuck on top of? That's right, a mountain. Wow. Just like the other accounts. And then, so what happens is Utnapishtim, he sends off a dove on the 7th day. But she returns finding no resting place. Next, he sends off a swallow, and again the swallow returns to him. Finally, he sends off a raven, but the raven did not come back, meaning she found food. Now, this is fascinating. Here we have the 3-bird theme. Did you guys notice this? Except with the Noah, the raven is sent off first, right? And what, of course, in the story that we see from Islam, the raven is not only sent off first, that's a bad raven, right? The raven is eating, decayed food, unclean food. But in this account, you're going to have the raven is sent off last. But notice the 3s. This idea of 3s that's connected to the flood spreads all the way across Eurasia and to East China, and even further across to Siberia. And yeah, I know you're going to be thrown off, and even into North America. I got your attention now. Wait, what? So there's a strange 3 theme that you're going to see entwined with it. And you can see, I'm not going to suggest that there's some oral traditions that are spreading, but you'll see this pretty soon beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the beauty of this. I'm going to have a chance. We're going through these flood stories, and after a while, you're going to be going, oh, no, really? Okay, so, all right. So Utnapishtim, what happens after that is that he's going to make, guess what, a sacrifice, just like you saw in all the others in Thanksgiving. This is a beautiful one. It says, accordingly, when the, quote, gods smelled the sweet savor, they gathered like flies over the sacrifice. Isn't that beautiful, the imagery? Oh, okay. Maybe not gathering like flies, but it's like, okay. And as a reward for his righteousness, Utnapishtim is given the jewels of heaven that once Anu had made to please Ishtar, and he gains immortality. That's pretty easy, right? And you're thinking, okay. So you're thinking, okay, so that's got to be the only, you see, got two Sumerian stories. Is that it, Dr. Rietveld? No, there's a third one that I'll be brief about. Just to tell you, just to say there's lots of stories. This one you're going to have here is that it's similar to the other story. We're back to the basically here it is. Sorry, a thing was dropping here. It's written around 2000 BCE. In this version, Enki is the one who provides instructions to create a giant ark to a righteous man, constructed of wooden ribs, ropes, and covered with bitumen. In this version, the ark is completely round, measuring 3,600 square meters in area and having 6-meter high walls. In this text, also, it has the animals entering the ark 2 by 2. So you're going to see that theme now running through the Sumerian legend. Okay, you're thinking, okay, so that's great. This is all the Middle East. I can see the connections. Let's move to the Greeks and Romans. What? Greeks and Romans? Wait a second. Wait, where do we go with this? The Greeks and Romans have a flood story. Of course they do. Well, how does this work? Okay, the Greek and Roman story basically is you have the story of Deucalion. Deucalion, who is the son of Prometheus, the Titan. And of course, we take a look back here, and I don't want to go through all this in detail, but I'll just say this, is that you have 4 different ages of humanity. You have the age of gold, where humans are just wonderful and righteous and live to be 100 years old, and then they go away and become like spirits. You got the Silver Age. So you move from the age of righteousness to the age of basically hubris, of pride. And during the Silver Age, there's a lot of violence coming on there, and humanity descends now into the Bronze Age. Okay, at the Bronze Age level, many Greeks talk about how this begins. Once again, you have humans are rebooted every time. It's like a reboot. Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, reboot. Humans have a problem. And that problem is we just like eating people. So we're violent, you know, we're kind of acting evil here. The so-called chaos that came from Pandora's box is now infecting humanity. I mean, you got lots of things going on here. So there is this concept of evil. But what will happen is, I guess what really bothers Zeus is that the Lycaon, the king of Arcadia, sacrificed the boy to Zeus. That didn't go over very well. He struck him down and made him into a werewolf. Ooh, okay. And then he goes down, in one version of the story, he goes down and visits the sons of the former king of Arcadia. It was a Lycaon's house. Of course, Zeus comes as a stranger, you know, the rules of hospitality, and he comes as a stranger, and you know what? They give him a nice meal, sheep cuts, livers, hearts, and of course, finely sliced body of their brother Nicetimus. You know, apparently, that's not a good thing. So Zeus, enraged, turned all the brothers into wolves, and he restores the one brother to life. And he realizes that, yes, guess what? In this case, just like the Judeo-Christian version, I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, humanity's evil. Humanity's wicked. Sorry. So this is the pagan version, Greco-Roman. Humanity's deemed as wicked, and they have to be destroyed. I kind of feel sorry for humanity in the Greco-Roman version. I mean, it's tough. I mean, seriously. Tough, as in tough meat. What do you mean by that? I mean, look at this. I mean, you know, he makes this version of humanity. He makes man, and he only makes men. That's it. And he doesn't want to give them even fire, to cook their meat. So these men are eating a bunch of raw meat, and Prometheus, who helped create humanity, feels bad and gives him fire, and Prometheus gets thrown asunder and has his guts being eaten out all the time. I mean, terrible stuff. And then of course, in punishment for humanity, female kind is made. Isn't that horrible? It's a terrible story. Patriarchy on steroids. Okay, so anyway, awful, terrible stuff. And here we have humanity it's time to wipe you guys out. I guess there's just seeking better meat. I don't know. Okay, these jokes got to stop. So moving right along, you probably hope you didn't catch the subtle subtext on that one. So what will happen here is humanity is going to be destroyed. And so the story goes is that the fountains of the deep are released, much like in the Noetic version. But there's no animals being placed on board, but you do have a righteous family. The husband, obviously, is Deucalion. The wife is Spira. You have a great flood. And then after the flood, guess what? Same as all the others. The ark, the boat gets stuck on top of a mountain peak. Again, another mountain peak experience. Well, maybe not quite that. And they get stuck up there, and then sometimes the mountain is Mount Parnassus. In other cases, it's Mount Athos. Sometimes it's Mount Etna, which, by the way, I would not want to have the ark on top of Mount Etna. It's like, talk about getting blown asunder. Anyway, in thanksgiving for being saved from the flood, Deucalion, like Noah, like Utnapishtim, like all the others, offers a sacrifice. You can't say this is a coincidence. Does that make sense? You can't say, hey, these stories are not connected. How can you possibly not? Oh, and then the earth is repopulated. I always love the various versions of repopulating the earth. First of all, they sent out for an oracle, a Deucalion Fira. And this oracle, it's sent out, and basically it's how do we repopulate the earth? So they sent out an oracle to the Oracle of Thetis. Of course, my question to this story is, why is there an oracle that's still around? It's an actual place if the whole world is flooded. But we won't go there. We'll just stop. But apparently there's an oracle. And the answer comes back, and it says, in order to repopulate the earth, cover your head and throw the bones of your mother behind your shoulder. Throw the bones of your mother behind your shoulder. I want you to remember this story too. They interpret mother as the mother goddess Gaia, who is the mother of all living things. They understand the bones, therefore, if it's Mother Earth, must be rocks. And so they pick up rocks, and so Deucalion throws the rocks over his shoulder, and as a result, outgrows men. Spira covers her head, throws the rocks over her shoulder, out comes female kind. This is why you shouldn't throw rocks. Anyway, so you never know what you're going to get, Okay, sorry, at least not in the glass house. So we move on from there. So humanity is repopulated through that way. You're thinking, okay, so Dr. Rietveld, this is Western culture. Yeah, and so far, it looks like they all have similar themes. An individual, right, receives a message from the gods. He did something either wrong or there's some kind of reason for that. There's an ark that is built, right? There is a great flood. It's a worldwide flood. In many cases, there's animals aboard. In some cases, there's not. And then, of course, you have being stuck on top of a mountain peak, and there's a sacrifice and a repopulating of Earth. Did you guys notice that? Now, that's too many details to be random. Does that make sense? Mathematically, it's impossible that these ideas came out autochthonically. It had to have, there has to be a connection. Does that make sense? I mean, there has to be a connection. I'm saying this because we're moving to India. And here we go. In the Indian version, You have, of course, in the Puranas, it mentions that in other places besides that, there is a great man. His name is Manu. He's a very righteous man. He became king of all humanity. It's Manu, M-A-N-U. One day, King Manu was washing his hands and found a small fish in his washing basin. The fish said, "Please save me," not wanting to go literally down the sink. "If you save me, I'll save you." Manu says, "Okay," puts the fish in a nice bowl. Fish outgrows the bowl. He puts him into a tank. The fish outgrows the tank, and it's time to release the fish back into the ocean. But the fish says, "I'm going to save you from a great flood." Manu says, "Okay." So when is this going to happen? Actually, right away. So what I want you to do is I want you to build an ark. What? This is India. I know. I want you to build an ark, and I want you to take 2 of every kind of animal on the earth, along with the seeds of every plant. Doesn't it sound familiar to some of the other versions of the story? Suddenly the floods came, and Manu tied his great ship to the horn of the great fish, and this great fish steered Manu and the animals on board through the treacherous waters. Manu's vessel was brought, as the waters receded, to the very top of the Himalayas. He secured the rope between his ship and one of the mountain peaks. And then as a result, guess what he did? He offered a sacrifice to the gods. Specifically, in one version, it's Vishnu. In another version, it's Brahma. Okay. You're going, "Okay, Dr. Rietveld, all right, yeah, okay, I'm seeing the connection here." There's another Indian version who is a good guy. His name is Satyavrata. He's instructed by the gods to build an ark along with pairs of animals. In this version, not only is his family invited on board, but 7 holy men and their wives, but he's only given 7 days notice to prepare. And basically you have the ark, and you have the mountain peak, and you have the sacrifice. All right. And you're thinking, "Okay, Dr. Rietveld, is there anything else?" Here we go. Persia. Persia? There's a Persian flood story? Yeah, this is a very odd one. It's very strange. It's in Zoroastrianism, and a lot of people don't know this one. So here we go. In the Persian version, Persian version, sorry, I'm just enjoying the, okay. You have a righteous man, and his name is Yima, just like Manu. And he lives to be pretty old. He lives almost to be 1,000 years old. And but the problem is, now listen closely, this version, because remember, Zoroastrianism is one of the major world religions today. It's a major world religion. So this is kind of a big deal. In this version of the story, Ahura Mazda makes humanity, and humanity starts to overpopulate the earth. Oh, so we have the overpopulation situation that you see also in the Mesopotamian version. There's too many people. So what are we going to do? So what happened is Ahura Mazda, the great all-high righteous God, he makes the earth grow larger by 2/3. So literally like blowing up a balloon, it goes to fit more people. But humanity just keeps expanding. We just don't stop. So Ahura Mazda told Yima that a great winter was coming with freezing air. And afterwards, snow was going to melt and cause a great flood. So Ahura Mazda told Yima to build a vara, which is a large square-shaped enclosure. Here he was told to collect 2 specimens of each living thing in the earth to protect them from the disaster that was to come. And Yima made the vara long as a writing ground on every side of the square. There he brought the seeds of sheep and oxen, of men, of dogs, of birds, of red blazing fires. He made a vara long, made it very strong. He made the waters flow in the bed, hearth along. He had places for birds, and goes on and on. He brings the seeds of men and women, of the greatest and the best and the finest, and also the best seeds of all kinds of cattle. What is interesting here is he doesn't bring a lot of people, he brings the seeds of people, which is fascinating. It's not an ark, it is an enclosure. Got it? And in this enclosure, he saves the seeds. There's also like a skeleton crew of people who are living who will tend the seeds of humanity and of all the animals. Kind of figures out the Noah story of how in the world can you fit all these animals onto the ark. In this case, the theoretical idea is, well, the Persians must have thought, hey, how do you do that? I don't think this is going to work. These animals are just simply not going to fit. They thought, hey, maybe if we can make some theoretical seeds and store them away in this enclosure, that's the way out. And that's basically what happens. And the snow, it melts. And so as opposed to being an ark, it's this enclosure, and the water covers and surrounds the enclosure, and everybody is safe. And then, which is the best of humanity, the most righteous. And then, of course, the waters go down, and then humanity spreads across the earth. That is the Zoroastrian version. You have sort of this idea that humanity is not quite righteous, but that's not the big deal. It's just there's too many of us. And there's almost like a natural selection field that we're going to pick the very best of humanity, make them into little seeds, and have them in this enclosure. So there you have it. You're thinking, okay, so where else do we go on from here? Is this interesting? Any questions so far? Right? You guys okay? Okay, let's go into a little bit more unknown territory. Let's go to Lithuania. Yes, Lithuania has a flood story. In this myth, from his heavenly window, the supreme god, Pramzimus, saw nothing but war and injustice among mankind. So humans are bad and evil again. So he sends out 2 giants. Wait, a giant theme. Well, that's interesting because we had a little bit of a giant theme in the Hebrew Bible version, remember? Okay. 2 giants, Wandu and Wedges. Wandu means water, Wedges means wind, to destroy the earth, flooding the world. After 20 days and nights, little was left. Pramzimus looked to see the progress. He happened to be eating nuts at the time. I don't know why he's sitting there watching the world flood and people dying, and he's sitting there eating nuts. But he's sitting there eating nuts, and one of the nutshells falls. It falls from him, and it happens to land on the tallest mountain. So you have this gigantic nutshell that is on top of the mountain. And there happen to be people who are seeking refuge on top of this mountain that happen to see this giant nutshell. And so what they do is they jump in the nutshell. And when the water covers the top of the mountain peak, this nutshell then floats along with various animals being saved. And that's how the remnant of society, of humanity survives. The god he calms down, he feels bad, and he promises never to do it again. And yes, he promises with a rainbow. So you do have, wow, there's another component. So you could see, okay, it looks like the Lithuanian story also has connections. You're thinking, okay. Then, of course, you have the Finnish story. I'm not going to finish with this one. I have quite a few more examples and stopping with the jokes again. The Finnish version, you basically have this rune called the Hava. And basically you have this hero god by the name of Vanamonian. He was reportedly born and in his mother's womb, He survives there for 730 years before he emerges. By the way, 730 years being in mom's womb is kind of a long time. Maybe it's a womb with a view. Okay, so what happens is, all right, is that so he emerged with all the wisdom of those before, but as he's attempting to make a boat, he accidentally wounded his knee with an axe. And this wound releases a great flood of blood that covers the entire world. Fortunately, he had made a boat so people could jump in the boat and be saved from his own blood. Okay, but there's still the same kind of theme. In this case, the flood is an accident, right? In Siberia, you have the Votyax, Votyax, and they tell us why. Sorry, I'm thinking that's a Greek mistake. So Votyaks. You can see where that joke came from. Basically, there is a righteous man. His name is Noj, which sounds a lot like Noah. This is not Siberia. Who built a boat to be spared from a great flood to save humanity. Well, that's in Siberia. So these stories you can see, are moving across Lithuania, of course, obviously Finland, crossing over to Siberia. Interesting, huh? But now, let's go to the Lolos people of northern Myanmar. Yeah, and southern China. Lolos. This tells how the world became very wicked. Oh, we're bad again. We're evil again. And so the god Tsegudzi, Tsegudzih, asked for some human blood and flesh to compensate for their evil ways. Now, this is interesting. So they're asking for a human sacrifice. I think it's interesting because the Greek one, they're being punished for the human sacrifice. In this one, they're being asked to do the human sacrifice. All refused except for Demu, D-U-M-U. Okay, and so what happened is Tsegudzi locked the rain gates, and as the waters rose, all perished, save the faithful hero Demu, who survived the great flood by climbing into a hollow log with his 4 sons. He was also accompanied by various animals, including lampreys, wild ducks, and otters. So the literate Lolos in Chinese were descendant of one of these 4 sons. As for the illiterate peoples after the flood, Demu carved some wooden images that magically came to life so that the world may be repopulated faster. Now, what I find is interesting about this is, once again, magical means used to repopulate the earth after you have this flood story, which of course you see also in the Deucalion story. Did you guys notice that? So there is something going on here. Chinese version is interesting. Reason why is that it doesn't seem to quite fit, but it introduces an element that will mix with some of the other stories I'm going to bring up. So I still have to tell this flood story because it brings up the brother-sister scenario when it comes to the flood story that we're going to see in many different cultures. So as opposed to a righteous man, you're going to get the brother-sister that are the saviors. So I'll tell you the story, and then we will go from here. So the story goes as follows. Once upon a time, it's a D-U-Z, if you're wondering to know, the 9th century writes this down, D-U-Y-I. Long ago, when the world was first began, there were 2 people, Nukua and her older brother. They lived on Mount Kulam, and there were not yet ordinary people in the world. They talked about becoming husband and wife, but they felt ashamed. So the brother at once went with his sister up Mount Kulunum and made his prayer. O heaven, if you would send us two forth as man and wife, then make all the misty vapor gather. If not, then make all the misty vapor disperse. At this, the misty vapor immediately gathered. When the sister became intimate with their brother, they plaited some grass to make a fan to screen their faces. Nuwa, of course, is in charge of maintaining the wall of heaven, for it was damaged by various calamities. One day, the water god Gonggong got into a fight with Zhurong, with their words turning into physical blows. When Gonggong realized he was losing, he threw himself against Mount Buzu, which is one of the four pillars upholding the sky. And so the entire earth tilted northwest, while the earth fell to the southeast. Suddenly the world was covered with water, as well as fires rising from the earth. Man-eating monsters appeared too in panic. Nuwa cut the legs off a giant tortoise and managed to buttress the sky with this severed tortoise leg to hold up the sky. And you're thinking, what a great story. Thank you for that. Why didn't we have to sit through it? Well, the Vietnamese, here we go. The story of Vietnam, Vietnamese story is in many respects similar, except in this version, you have at the amongst those who are suffering from this flood, you have yet another brother and sister who are rescued by a giant chest containing two of every animal. Ooh, wait, what just happened there? I got you, didn't I? I was like, wait, that's an interesting. So you're thinking, okay, so maybe some of the missionaries, you know, in Vietnam, maybe they introduced this idea. The problem is it goes before those missionaries ever arrived. Now we have a problem. So you can see many scholars will say that the Chinese story is now connecting with the Indo-European story that comes across from the Mesopotamia, obviously being spread, Persia, going to India, and just kept coming across and kind of met in Southeast Asia. Does that make sense? So you're going to have now this merging of these stories coming together. And you think we're done. No, now we have the Kamu tribe of Thailand. Also a pair of brother and sister, where they're warned of an upcoming flood by a mouse. And so the two seal themselves inside of a drum and emerge after the flood receded. And they look for everybody, but everybody is gone. So they found a cuckoo bird saying to them, brother and sister should embrace one another. They slept together, and after 7 years, the child was born in a gourd. So basically, she gave birth to a gourd. A little later, hearing noises from the gourd, it burst open, and as a result, you have the first races coming out of this gourd. And that's their story. In fact, that happens quite a bit. In Burma, the Burmese flood story goes as follows. When there is a flood, you have Papa Noonchang and his sister Chanku, and they saved themselves in a large boat. They took with them 9 cocks and 9 needles. When the storm and rain had passed, each day they threw out 1 cock and 1 needle to see whether the waters were falling. On the 9th day, they finally heard the cock crow and the needle strike the bottom. They left their boat, wandered about, and came to a cave, home of 2 knots, or like elves. This elf bade them to stay and make themselves useful. Soon the sister gave birth, and the old elfin woman minded the baby, but then she kind of became wicked, and she killed the baby and cut the baby in little pieces, and spread the pieces along the road, along the crossroads. And what happened is the mother cried out, restore my baby. And the god says, well, we're not going to do that, or the Great Spirit, we're not going to do that. But from the blood of the torn up child will come all the races of humanity. Are you guys seeing similarities yet? Are you guys seeing that beyond a reasonable doubt already there are some strong connections between all these stories? But you're seeing here as we're going through each one, there's differences, but there are different elements that seem to repeat over and over again. Well, I can keep going on to Southeast Asia forever, but there's a lot more. But let's jump over to, hey, let's go to the New World, which is really the Old World, which doesn't matter anyway. Here we go. Let's go to, let's talk about the Aztecs. There we go. The Aztec story. You have Tlaloc, or Quetzalcoatl. He warns of a great flood. According to the Aztec gods, humans in this case became arrogant. Oh, guess what? We're wicked again. We're back to the evil, right? So because humans decided that they could do without the gods. This theme, by the way, we find quite a bit in the Greco-Roman version, especially during the Silver Age. We can do without the gods. It's arrogance. So Tlaloc decides to destroy these obstinate people from the face of the earth. Fortunately, not everybody was killed, for he found two righteous people, Tata and Nina. So the gods told them to hollow out a log. Next, they were each permitted to take one ear of corn to feed upon for their journey. Tlaloc strictly told both of them that they must not eat anything else. No, not eat anything else except for the ear of corn that was provided for them. Okay, as long as they did that, they would be saved. So the water comes, they're aboard their little log, and the waters soon subside, and they get to dry land. And you know what? They see a fish, and they're hungry. But no, they're not supposed to have a fish. What are they supposed to have? Their ear of corn, nothing else. But they go ahead and have a fish. Well, Tlaloc is super angry at this. You know, he says, "This is how I repaid for saving your lives." So Tlaloc turned Tata and Nina into dogs. And then he determined that this entire world needs to be destroyed. And so he basically destroys the fourth world, and the fifth world begins from there. Oh, talk about a hot temper there, but again, we're over here in Mesoamerica, and we're experiencing a similar story. You guys ready for another one? Let's go to the Cheyenne. Yeah. I like this story. The Cheyenne talks about how great medicine created humanity. Accordingly, a great medicine, he fashioned the heavens and the earth and the waters upon it. He established a beautiful country to the north, where it was always spring of the year, with trees bearing bountiful fruit and burbling brooks. Here, humans and animals were able to communicate easily with one another. And in fact, they lived in complete harmony. Get this, humans and animals could read each other's thoughts and talk to one another. Isn't that kind of cool? Like this telepathy thing the Cheyenne came up with, you know? Now, accordingly, the Cheyenne assert that great medicine created three races of humanity. Hey, there's three races. That's interesting. The first kind had hair all over their bodies from head to toe, much like animal fur, and were very strong and active. The second kind had white skin and had hair on their heads, cheeks, and legs, and they were known to be quite cunning, like a wolf. So, and they're tricksters, by the way. So these white people are tricksters in the story. Finally, great medicine created the red people, who were swift and great runners, and he taught these people specifically how to catch fish. Now, the hairy people eventually moved south, and the red people decided to follow them, leaving the white people behind. But before they left, great medicine gave them a blessing. And as he blessed them, a medicine spirit entered into them, awakening their minds so that the red people became very intelligent. With this knowledge, the red people also realized that they were naked and they clothed themselves. When the red people arrived in the lands of the south, they found the hairy people still naked and living in caves and mountains, afraid to come down. Eventually, the hairy people became less and less and disappeared altogether. Now, Great Medicine told the red people to come back north, for the lands of the south were going to be flooded. It's going to be a great flood. Yet when the red people returned to the beautiful land of the north, they found the white people were gone, and that many of the animals they knew were also gone. Furthermore, they realized they could no longer talk to the animals like they had before. That gift was lost. Returning south again following this great flood, the red people encountered a second flood that scattered them, and they began to starve to death. But when they returned once more to the north, to the beautiful land, it had completely disappeared. With no hope, they went back south. They grew desperate. The Great Medicine had pity on them and introduced maize to them, teaching them how to grow in abundance, and also gave them buffalo meat to eat. Still, much of the magic taught by Great Medicine was remembered, and they handed down this knowledge to their children and their children's children. Do you see anything familiar in this story at all? It looks like you're not just getting a flood story, but you're getting stories that seem to connect to some of these other stories. Are you seeing the relation? Right? Sorry, I hit the speaker. Can you hear me still? Okay, good. Hit something. So you're thinking, okay, so, oh good, we have more time. What about the Cree Indian story? I love getting real obscure because I think it's fun to hear stories that you've never heard before. Something happened to Jack, I'm not sure, but so the Cree story from Canada begins with the Creator Spirit making all the animals and the first people. And they're placed under the charge of a certain lower spirit known as Wisakaja. And he instructs them, take good care of my people and teach them how to live. Show them all the bad roots, all the roots that will hurt and kill them. Do not let people or animals quarrel with each other. Unfortunately, this lower spirit disobeys, letting the people and animals fight one another. And many perish, soaking the earth with their combined blood. So the Creator Spirit decided to wash the world clean of this evil. Wow, really? Yeah, well, okay. So in this case, you have a lower spirit who's messing things up, tainting humankind to the point where they're always fighting each other. And so everything's covered with blood. You got to clean things up. So what will happen is, so the Creator Spirit decided to wash the world clean of this evil, and the blood upon the ground all perished under the waters, save an otter, one beaver, and one muskrat. One otter, one beaver, and one muskrat, as well as, of course, the lower spirit. Embarrassed, he decided to try to make things right and said, if I could get a bit of the old earth beneath the water, I can make a little land for us to live on. Now the Great Spirit said, well, let's see. I have the power to create. You, lower spirit, you don't have the power to create. However, with that said, you can expand upon what I already made. So yeah, I'll let you, if you want to, dive down below the floodwaters and grab some of this earth. You can expand this earth. Otherwise, of course, the entire world will be covered with water. So he tells the otter, first of all, to dive under the water to fetch him a piece of earth, saying that I will give you a fish as a reward. The otter goes under the water 3 times and is unsuccessful. That's interesting. So he calls him a coward, but oh well. So then he says the beaver, he says, okay, all right, you're going to go and you're going to try to grab the ground from under the waves and bring it back up. I'm going to promise you a wife in this case. So the beaver dives down in the water 3 times, comes back up, and is unsuccessful. Finally, you have the muskrat. And the muskrat, same thing. I'm going to give you a wife again. I don't know why the first one you got a fish. Next two get wives. So what happens is that now the muskrat goes down. On the third try, it comes up with a little clod of earth. As a result, the lower spirit goes, okay. So he expands this earth and makes it into this floating boat, and expands it until out will grow from this all the lands upon the oceans. But every now and then, this boat will spring a leak, and those are springs and lakes. Now you're going, so what does this have to do with the earlier stories? If you're looking closely, you can see it. You can see a lot of the themes, especially the notion of threes, the idea of being on the waters and checking for life. Isn't this fascinating? And you're going, wait a second. Again, we're back to mathematical, it's not probable from a mathematical sense to say that the story is in complete isolation to the others. Although at first, if you hear it, you don't see a connection. But if now that you've heard all these stories, you start going, okay, there's something going on here. Are you seeing this? Right? Here we keep on going. Okay. But there's another Cree story, because, hey, the Crees have more than one story. And I'll just tell you this story real quick. The same lower spirit, he's fighting what's called Great Beaver. And so wants to kill the Great Beaver, lower spirit. And so what happens is Great Beaver decides that through his magical powers to cause a muskrat to bite the lower spirit in his butt. Well, okay, that's wonderful. And then what happens from there is Great Beaver, in his revenge, rises the waters of the earth. And so as a result, the lower spirit builds a raft of logs and tries to save as many animals as possible along with himself. After 2 weeks, he sends the muskrat to look for dry land, but is drowned. Next, he sends out a raven. What? Wait, a raven? It's a Cree story. Sends out a raven to look for dry land, could not find any. And so then what happens is that he magically then causes the moss to grow around the raft of logs until it grows into land again. Similar ideas, but there's that raven that got stuck in there. Is this interesting? So you're going, wait. But once again, you have the three concept. You're going, okay, well, that's good. Is there any more? Well, yeah, of course there's more. I'll tell you a few more. Whew. But there's of course, obviously, you have those of the Great Lakes. And you have a certain Nanabozo, the great hero of the Anishinaabe tribes from the Great Lakes. And what happens is that the story goes, he could not find his cousin. He is looking everywhere for him until he chanced to come across these giant snake tracks. And apparently he saw a marking that apparently he thinks that his cousin is being dragged by these snakes along with these snake tracks. And so he follows these snake tracks to this enchanted lake known as the Lake of Spirits, or the Lake of Evil. And down in the murky depths of this lake lies this great serpent. And this great serpent, this great snake, is coiled around his cousin. Oh, And so he has to try to free his cousin. So what he does is he tries to free him. Unfortunately, his cousin dies. So what he does is he orders the clouds to be gone, the wind to be stilled, and he orders that the air elements make the lake real hot, and so the lake starts to boil. Well, this is kind of creepy because not one snake, but all of these snakes rise from the boiling lake. Meanwhile, the waters rise to the point where it starts flooding the land, along with this great serpent. And so what happened is that even though he mortally wounds the great serpent, the waters rise higher and higher. He runs to his village, tells his people to run to the mountaintops. One by one, The mountains themselves were covered by water, all except one mountain known as Lakes, which is north of Lake Superior. And so they gathered on top of this mountain with various animals, realizing this mountain too would disappear beneath the waves. Nanobazu, gathered timber as fast as possible and built a great raft to hold the surviving people and animals. At the moment the last person was on board the giant raft, the last mountain went under the water. Meanwhile, the great serpent finally died of his wounds and sunk, and the other serpents were defeated, and eventually they have, obviously the waters go down. Do you see any similar themes here? Right? Is this good? All right, we have a few more moments. I'll go ahead and share just a few more, but I think I'm getting through, right? That there are similarities here, right? And it's hard to say there's no connection. Don't worry, we're going to go over what those connections could be. Let's see if I have a few other favorite ones, just quite a few. Oh, I'll read this one here. You have the Athabascan Indians of Alaska. Why not? We'll do that one here. Instead of humans, they're animals. The story goes that before the existence of humankind, giant animals ruled the world and were able to both talk and use great magic. On one occasion, the great raven. What? A great raven as the main character? Well, this is fascinating. Known as Datsosa, told an average raven to build a raft. Now, this story, it's the raven who is building a raft. Oh, you just can't make this up. Baffled by the sudden request, the raven did as ordered, but Datsosa was not satisfied, saying the raft was not big enough. Making a bigger raft, it suddenly began to rain. Datsosa told the raven to quickly gather the animals in pairs, male and female, as well as to collect food for them and to use it upon the great raft. Soon the entire world was beneath the waves. Once the rain ceased, the raven instructed seagulls to search for land. Seagulls. But the birds returned, saying they couldn't find any. So Raven sent a giant muskrat to go down to the bottom of the water and start piling up mud down there so that the dry land would finally emerge. Once again, the land appeared thanks to the giant muskrat's help, just a little bit of muskrat love. And so what you have is that everything was covered and restored again. Okay, that's pretty bizarre. Now you have the raven as the main protagonist, right? Okay. And of course, we can go on. You have the Algonquin Indians of East Canada. They have a similar story. The god Michaba asked the raven to find some dry land so he could create new land. But the raven was unsuccessful. He asked an otter to do the same. He too failed. Finally sent out a muskrat. He did find earth, yada, yada. You have the, I love this. How about the Caddo Indian flood story of East Texas? Hey, now we're here. We're in the United States, all right? Let's go there. This is a great story. In the ancient of days, the wife of a chief gave birth to 4 hideous monsters, each with 4 legs and 4 arms. The chief viewed them as manifestations of evil and determined to kill them for the good of the tribe. But his wife pleaded with them, saying that they were his own flesh too, and they needed to give them a chance, these giants. Oh, hey, we're back to that giant theme. The chief relented, and so the 4 monsters grew to an incredible size and was quite mean, bullying the children, destroying people's property, and worst of all, defecating on the people's food. It's terrible. So a wise man came to them and said the 4 monsters needed to die. You think? But the chief's wife insisted it would turn out okay. Just like a good mom, just, I believe that these, it's going to turn out okay. Just give them some time. Well, they matured. They became giants. One day, they all went to the middle of the village, leaned up against each other, back to back, and became one giant, now having 16 legs, 16 arms, and 4 heads. And the 4 heads are so high that it touched the sky. This is a problem. And it's still doing the same immature things as before. The wise man heard a voice that told him to plant a hollow reed in the ground. When he did so, this reed instantly grew and also rose to the top of the sky. The voice told the wise man that a great flood was about to set forth upon the earth, instructing the wise man and his wife to climb inside the hollow reed. They were to take 2 of each animal with them. Furthermore, the voice told them that they were to enter the reed naked in the time that they were born. As for the sign, the voice said, when all the birds in the world, birds in the woods, the sea, the desert, and the high mountains form up into a cloud flying from north to south, that will be the sign. Watch for the cloud of birds. So the sign appeared, and so they crawled into this gigantic hollow tube. The rain descended, so the entire earth was covered, right? And so now a great voice told them that a great turtle would kill the 4 monsters. There's this great battle. The monsters are killed. Everything is destroyed. But good news, the waters descend, and they come out of this hollow naked, but within 4 days, the spirits give them food to eat. You know, and of course the stories go on. You have a Hawaiian story that is similar. And the final one I will say today, because people always say, well, at least the Australian Aborigines don't have a flood story. Guess what? The Australian Aborigines have a flood story. This is their story. This is the last one, and I'll do a little bit of analysis after this. Okay, so once upon a time, the story begins with the drought throughout the land of Australia, with many animals dying of thirst. The crisis was so extreme that all the animals agreed to meet together at a great council to decide what to do. They agreed that the only way to relieve the drought was to make the frog laugh. You got to make the frog laugh. So they all surrounded the frog and attempted one by one to try to make the frog laugh. So the kookaburra bird, known to sound like he is laughing, tried to make the frog laugh with his laughter. He did so into extreme exhaustion. So the first try did not work. The second, the frill lizard tried next, puffing out his cheeks, but the frog did not even look at him. Nope, not working. I wonder if there's going to be a third try. Of course there's going to be a third try in connection to a flood story. Finally, an eel asked to try, but no one thought he of all animals could accomplish this impossible feat. Not discouraged, the eel flipped about and contorted himself, dancing spastically about. When the frog saw him, his eyes bulged, his mouth fell open, and with an ocean pouring out of his mouth, inundated the entire world with water, with both people and animals drowning. So a pelican made a canoe and sailed from island to island, rescuing both humans and animals from the flood, and eventually the water subsided. Okay, we've heard a lot of stories here. A lot of stories. I'll make some notes, but I think I made my point already. Okay? The first point I want to make out is there a connection between these stories? It's hard to say there's not. Right? It's difficult to say there's no connection. So many of these stories have similar tropes, similar ideas. You do have a beginning situation where there is a cause, whether it be a righteousness or overpopulation or an accident, but there is a cause. You have a righteous man or a righteous pair, but you have a singularity or a couple. The funny thing is, I like the Deucalion and Phaera. You actually do have a husband-wife. That is a pair, right? So you have almost in between a stage. You do have the idea in many of these stories of the creation of an ark. You do have of course, obviously a flood. It seems to be worldwide in most of these stories. You do have this strange 3 theme, whether it be setting off birds, but you see the 3 theme in almost all of these legends, which really kind of throws me off. And then you have, in many of these stories, did you guys notice? So many of these stories has a mountain at the end. There's a mountain, you know, even in the Indian stories, you got a mountain. There it is. And then you have some kind of sacrifice. And then you have some way that the tribes of humanity are spread across the earth by various means. Okay, so how in the world can these ideas all connect? Well, the one thought is that you have the migration theory. The migration theory is that maybe there was a localized flood, perhaps. Maybe the Black Sea, you know, 5000 BCE. You know, there's evidence, archaeological evidence, that the Black Sea was a freshwater lake. It's not that hard to find out. All you do is bore under the Black Sea, and hello, you got freshwater fish, and you have settlements. And at some point, it burst. If you mathematically look at the fact of how much water had accumulated behind those glaciers, that would definitely be a localized flood. It would cover a large amount of area. And of course, it turns out that there happened to be a group of people called the Indo-Europeans. And these Indo-Europeans lived just around the Black Sea region in the Caucasus Mountains. They live right there. And around 5000 BCE, which is around the time this happened, if not maybe 1,000 years earlier, it turned out that the Indo-Europeans, also known as Caucasians, then spread from there, and we could trace them going through the languages, going west, going north, going east, going south. And so maybe they carried this story with them. Does that make sense? And through oral tradition, as they spread across different places, because remember, the Indo-Europeans, they ended up in Persia, right? Around 3,000, 2,500 BCE. The Indo-Europeans and the Caucasians, they ended up, now we know, because thank goodness for DNA evidence that works in northern India, we realize that they did enter India around 2,000 to 1,500 BCE. We also look at the pottery types, and we can now even analyze that in settlement types. And that'd be a wonderful talk to go into. That'd be a fun one. But anyway, so we now have those stories going all the way to India. Then, of course, those stories could go from there, right? Are you guys getting this? Could cross over into Southeast Asia and mix with localized traditions. Meanwhile, if you hadn't noticed, you have the Indo-Europeans, and they end up, one group ends up in the area, the Slavic areas, in the areas of Eastern Europe. Well, now you get a Lithuanian story that has similarities. You have a Finnish story that has similarities, and it crosses over Eurasia and goes all the way to Siberia. It very easily could spread. Hello, people have canoes, the Bering Straits, and go down from there. Does that make sense? It's very possible, because there's too many similarities. Now, that's one possibility. There's also the idea that, hey, there's a great flood, not there, but a great flood as a result of the Thera explosion. Although I think that's way too early, way too late when it comes to the Minoans. I think it's way too late for the story because many of these stories seem to date before that. There is also the idea that there is another situation in India where there was supposedly you have a meteor that fell around 3,000 to 2,800 BCE in the Indian Ocean, and maybe there's a flood there. Okay, we got that story down. Another theory is this, is that when it comes to the stories, what we come across in the regions of North America and South America, is that these stories are brought over by Europeans when they came to colonize these areas, the Spaniards, the Portuguese, and they start telling their stories from the colonies, and it spreads into the indigenous peoples of the Americas and goes that direction. And or you have when the various people recording these stories, they're biasing these stories by adding in components that that seem to support their own Judeo-Christian perspectives. This is a good theory, and I think it could be possible for many of them. The problem is, and it's a big problem, is that's why I threw in all the very northern indigenous stories in northern Canada and so forth, which are really not tapped in and were recorded in more of the scientific way without, in their own language, later on we're getting into the 20th century, later on, where they had no time to incorporate these elements. Sure, you got lots of beavers, and lots of different kinds of animals. Are you getting the point? But there's so many similarities even there. You could see why further down south, those who are colonists could be tempted to add their own elements in there, because so much of it's still there, even in the untapped story. So we're still back to the migration theory. Does that make sense? So the migration theory, and I think it's a fascinating study looking into the indigenous peoples of Alaska and northern Canada, areas where their stories are recorded later on in a more scientific way, without somebody going, hey, let's suggest that this idea or that idea, because they're really isolated up there. Is this interesting? So that's another possibility. We went through the migration theory. Another thought, I know we're going to wrap up right now, but I just want to, another thought is a similar phenomenology. Similar phenomenology is that we all, in a psychological way, have similar brains. And so we come up with similar ideas. So we go, there's only so many calamities that you can face. A great flood is a natural one, and there's this idea that we seem to have that if we're really bad, nature is not going to be very happy with us. So this punitive sense. And so the idea is, well, we've been bad, we'll be wiped out by a great flood. And so this idea is that people who are not even connected, since our brains are still similar, will kind of come up with the same kind of story. The wheel is not invented in one place, it's invented in multiple places. So you have common phenomenology. Okay, you guys okay? So that's the second one. The problem is that when it comes to the stories that I read to you, especially the ones that we came across, the biblical one, the Islamic one, obviously, the Sumerian stories, the Greco-Roman stories, the Zoroastrian story, and the Indian stories, they're way too close in so many details. They're kind of nixes that. They're obviously borrowing. And I see this sense of borrowing all the way through. I think somebody should do their PhD dissertation on, and call it The Raven. Because that Raven seems to be a fascinating theme that crosses all the way through. And I think that is fascinating to see. And it seems like it's a story of telephone, an oral tradition. You tell somebody and you tell the next person and the next person. And as time goes on, the story will change. And it seems like an obvious telephone kind of situation where, that raven just got stuck there somehow and continued to get exaggerated until there's like a great raven, but the great raven is ordering the boat to be made. I mean, I think that's just the funniest thing, and something that you wouldn't make up, nor would a Christian missionary transcribing the story going, hey, I think we'll make it a great raven. That's it changed that into a god. So anyway, other fascinating thoughts. So we covered that. So you guys got it. So you guys, first one, migration theory, second is common phenomenology. The third one is where we don't go with academics, and that is, ooh, it's the, ooh, maybe there's a spiritual connectedness that people just, some kind of revelation. And that is for pastors and poets, but not for academics. So if that makes sense. So that's the other possibility, that maybe something like a noetic flood did happen, and and all these belief systems have this God doing this, but they really don't. You have heroes or lower spirits, or but there we have from there. But I wanted to take the time, it's so exciting to actually go through each one of these stories, because if I just describe them and use them as supportive evidence, you would not have had the point made as well as hearing the stories at length and using your critical thinking skills to go, hey, wait a second, there is a connection between this one and this one and that one. And I think that's the beauty of going through the primary sources and it reveals itself that when somebody comes up to you and says, hey, is there a connection between these flood stories? You don't have to say no. You can say yes. But where you go from there is your choice. Thank you.
Good.
I'll take one last picture of everybody before we're all inundated by a flood. And if you want to turn the screens on, you can.
Great stuff, man.
And we're ready. Well, there. Okay, ready. 1. Eins, zwei, drei, go. All right. Done it. Okay. I'm done. Maybe I'll have something to drink. I didn't drink the whole time. Non-alcoholic, of course. Any questions?
I myself, I think it's a common phenomenon, or at least I'm inclined to think that. Can I imagine the possibility that there has been a story that has been carried over to the New World? Sure, I could see that as being plausible. The Bering Land Strait pretty much disappeared under the waves. It's something roughly about like 14,500 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So it'd have to be a very old story, right?
Well,
and considering that the corvids, like the ravens exist in both Old World and New World, and they're well known for their intelligence. So it's not surprising that peoples on both sides of the Atlantic would use them in their folklore, mythology, or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't be too surprised by similarities. It's like people believe that pyramids were created by the Atlanteans, right? Because you have pyramids in Mesoamerica and so forth. But the pyramid is it's not such a stretch for people to build something in a triangular form in a very basic sense, because it's in itself is supportive, right? So we shouldn't be surprised that people from different cultures would actually build pyramids, right? It's pretty practical. So a lot of similar elements. A lot of people live next to water. Well, we sort of can't avoid that part.
Right.
And around the world, we have plenty of floods.
Yes, we do.
I would challenge that on the basis that there seemed to be a lot more traffic going from the Old World to the New World long before Christopher Columbus. I think cocaine has been discovered in some Egyptian pharaohs' tombs. And obviously, the Bering Strait's pretty small, and the weather conditions are right. You can cross it in a canoe.
Cocaine has been found in Egyptian tombs. Well, send us.
I've heard that. Maybe James can correct me if I'm.
Well, I'm an academic myself, so I challenge you back to back that up somehow. Hearsay is not good enough.
Fair enough. That is utterly fair enough. Maybe that isn't true. I don't know. I've heard that, and I read it in a book. But don't ask me what book or if the book's even credible. Anyways, but I mean, we know the Vikings were landing on the East Coast well before, like hundreds of years before Columbus. And again, there does seem to have been a lot of traffic back and forth across the Bering Strait, and ideas travel much faster than people.
Yeah, what I want to bring up, I have a friend who is actually Alaskan Indian, and in fact, she was supposed to be here today, one of my friends. But there was not only a lot of traffic, it was constant across the way. I mean, in fact, it continued into the 18th, 19th, 20th century crossing. It's not that uncrossable. that's not even a word. And nice. Also, the other thing is you take a DNA couple groups and you look and you're going, no. People are constantly crossing from Siberia way after the Bering Straits are made. We have new DNA groups that are introduced all the way along the line from different strains because they mix them. For example, in South China, and they move up there and other places. In fact, I did a whole talk on the migration of couple groups and how we can trace them, which I think I gave you the outline of the. I think you won when we the contest. Remember that time you won the outline, the migrations. So I have the DNA haplogroups there. So there is a lot of mixing going on. And when people mix, they carry their stories with them. I think the real question is what components of those stories stayed and what components did not stay. With that said, Jack, I think you agree the raven is such an important factor, and that could be there way before without any connection to any kind of flood context. A raven is known for its intelligence, and a lot of these cultures have a raven as an important figure, and that would not necessarily have anything to do with the flood story. With that said, you still have the raven as an important component in so many of these cultures, which I do find is interesting. And why is it included? Yeah.
And also, let's be a little cautious. I mean, just because there's certain genomes, right? What we see in the genomes, you know, we don't want to go into a false correlation there. Just because you see in the genome some correlations with the genes from one group to the next doesn't necessarily mean cultural traits are also being transferred per se.
It doesn't, but it does when it comes to pottery type or when it comes to other aspects of the material culture. So if you have a DNA evidence and then you have the material evidence of a settlement and the pottery is of a type that shows that there's a mixture. You can easily, of course, obviously you and archaeologists know, you take a look at the pottery itself and you can just, you know, you look at the components of what it's made. You can see if it was traded or not. Taking a look at what the soil is, you know, of the actual pottery itself, where it's made. And you can do that. You can do the electron dating and figure out where it's made. I mean, you know, how old it is. I mean, there's a lot of fun bits that you can do with that. So I am being cautious. I'm not saying, that's why I said it's a theory or a thought or a possibility.
Sure.
But
like
the hypothesis. That's why I gave the three different possibilities. You could have the possibility that it could be migration. It could be also common phenomenology, which you brought up and did a great job supporting that. And of course, it could be the woo, what we will talk about.
Although I kind of like the third one in a way.
So
too much X-Files.
but yeah, you have to triangulate as much information as possible to come up. And still, we're left with theories. I'm very big into tracing pottery as it spreads across different places. I think that's nice. When a skeletal evidence that goes along with that, and settlement types, and art and other things that just adds to it. I do a lot with, you know, but yeah. But I think the support from that, I think it is more fluid than we thought in North as well as South America, and the DNA evidence does support that there's constant mixing. We're looking at the haplogroups and seeing where they divide off.
Well, just sort of a side note, I suppose, about genomes, what little I know, it is possible for certain genetic, I'll put it this way, alleles, I don't know if you guys are all familiar with that, frequencies to come and go, basically, right? So when those peoples came over to North America, certain alleles could, in various areas, could actually, how should I say, prosper well and actually multiply, essentially, you know, in the population, I mean, right? So you would see a variation in allele. Alleles basically is a location in the DNA sequence, right? You know, it's a lot of genetic jargon. So again, back to my point earlier, there may not be a correlation there. It just means that throughout the Americas, certain alleles that we see that would make them in some extent related to, say, more Western people, just happenstance for whatever reason, you know, fluke of of the annals of time, just became more frequent. Right.
Of course, we're also dealing with an interesting situation where you're having so many similar tropes that are seen to be thematic within these groups, and that's where we get into a little dicey there, where you think there may be something. Although, if you are into Jungian philosophy, And looking at the archetypes, and maybe it does make it easier to look into the mountain represents this, and the flood represents this, and we're all connected that way. And then goes into the second idea of common phenomenology, and we had these archetypes of flood, mountain, and we remember things in threes, right? Three is a natural way to and that's, you had noticed there's a lot of threes in a lot of the stories. And it's almost to the point where it's almost ridiculous, where they're trying almost too hard to make sure, hey, we got to have three, even with the frog. Why? Why is it, or three tribes coming from it, or three birds, or it's like three. And maybe it is something that's subconscious, or maybe it is part of the story. And that's exactly why we're here, to have this kind of conversation, to look into the possibility. We do not know. That's why the fun part is I presented you the stories, and you can kind of sense or take these stories and see how you interpret them. I think there is a connection. The question is, how are they connected? Right? There's a connection. There's something going on. The question is, what? Because we're missing so many of the pieces. Missing some of the pieces. But we have enough pieces left to have a general idea that there is something there, even when it comes to the migration theory. But we don't know. Again, we're back to the problem. And I think, Jack, you're sensitive to this. And that is how much of the colonizers introduced their ideas that got placed over the indigenous ideas.
It's plausible.
It's possible.
It's plausible, yeah.
Absolutely. So that's why I kind of did a little bit of the indigenous peoples of the United States. And I thought, I'm going to focus in on areas that are really isolated. The north, the Great Lakes area, and going all the way into the west of Canada, where you have the recording of stories in the 20th century. Indigenous people telling their stories. And because there's less of a bias or a tendency for a bias. And still, I see something going on, and I'm going, that's interesting. I think I gave you about maybe 5 or 6 examples just in that area alone. And I'm sure we have various animals, but some of the same themes. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Okay, James and Jack, Matt has posted a link to the article showing cocaine and nicotine in Egyptian mummies. I looked it up too. It's controversial, but yeah, it is a thing.
There
so
it is.
I want to. He did back it up.
There you go. Thank you, Matt.
Well, we have yet to read it, so don't get too enthusiastic.
Yeah, but it's there. So, if you are interested, you can look it up.
Well, where is that? I don't know. Where do I see it?
It's in the chat. It's in the chat.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's the description of the original study that came out of Batvia or whatever, and then it contains all the possible criticisms or alternative explanations other than trade across the Atlantic. So,
if you run an internet search, it pops right up.
Yeah, it's an actual. It's on UCR.edu, so it's an actual academic.
Academic, yeah. You see it. Okay.
Description of it.
University of California, Riverside.
Riverside. UCR. UCR is Riverside, right?
Yeah. University of California, Riverside. It's a good source.
Yeah.
They have a great history department as well. So yeah.
A really big Mesoamerican history department.
Yeah,
so it contains both the original reporting as well as the probable alternative explanations and criticisms of that discovery or finding. So there you go.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, just to keep in mind, for the sake of argument, if the ancient Egyptians were getting high on crack cocaine or whatnot, have a good time back in the old days. It's not the same thing. It doesn't actually in itself validate a migration theory in regards to the mythology that we're talking about in this lecture here.
No, but it does trade is a major way with which ideas are transferred. And
even
if trade existed between them, ideas probably exchanged as well.
But then again, we also need to know more about the biota, the flora in the old world, and maybe there's something similar. I don't know all the details.
That is in the article.
It's in the article.
There are things that grow in Egypt that might have a similar chemical reaction.
Okay, so
yeah, but
I got a source of cocaine in Egypt. Good to know, I guess.
Well, it's nicotine and cocaine, but yeah, I mean, there's possible alternative explanations other than just
Sure.
trade.
Sure. I mean, that's something going back even to Darwin's time. He noticed that there were plants on both sides of the Atlantic, in the Old World and the New World.
I mean,
So,
the fact
yeah, no
that
surprise there.
Ravens on both sides, you know, and,
Right. Yeah,
you know,
that's
and similar. There are all sorts of different animals that were in North America that died out in the last ice age.
Yeah.
That were also
tigers.
Yeah, tigers.
Oh, yeah.
Camels.
Camels. Yeah, camels.
Brea tar pits. We should all go there, field trip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In masks. Yeah.
Is it pretty
Mass exodus.
Feet apart.
is it pretty widely accepted that cocaine and nicotine for sure came from the Americas in the first place and couldn't have come from Europe and then gotten over around 14,000 years ago and then just disappeared from Europe and then just set up
good
shop
question.
in Americas?
That's a great question. Don't know.
Yeah, good question.
Very good question. Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, but it's an interesting subject to look into.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah. Any other thoughts and questions, or perspectives, or reviews?
I have a question about so is it pretty much I'm not a history major. Last time I took history was in college a long time ago, but it's pretty much the consensus that Native Americans came from Asian populations over the Bering Strait that long ago, that those are the first people to ever get into North and South America.
There is an answer to that question, and we are. It's like the tap dance. The tap dance is, for a while there had been a controversy concerning the Bering Straits, where many said they did not come from the Bering Straits. So I'd be like, we've always been here. It's like, well, no, you got to come from somewhere. But again, we're back to looking at the DNA evidence. We're going through this, and the answer to the question is this: there were multiple migrations across the Bering Straits, even though the Bering Straits are covered over around between 13,000 to 12 to 10,000 BCE. There's a period of time where it kind of ebbs and flows back and forth, doing studies on those islands. But still, I'll just say 13,000 BCE, 12,000 BCE, you have the Bering Straits cut off. Even after that time, there are groups that are migrating across that have mixtures from other groups that would mix later on historically. So what will happen is really, when you take a look at the DNA evidence within East Asia, it really is a soup where people migrate away, then they go back and intermarry with certain people, and then a new group comes in and they intermarry with those people, and then they go back over the other direction. It's really confusing. But you do have multiple migrations across the Bering Strait even afterwards. Some having sequences that come from a later period of time, and then this group splits. One group goes across to northern Canada, and they stay there. And a lot of the stories I just told you were that group. Another group goes down along the coast, and it goes all the way down to by the time we get to 10 and 9,000 BCE, they're all the way down to the tip of South America. With that said, they thought that the group was island hopping from Polynesia, and they stopped at the Easter Island. Now they did DNA evidence. They realized that no, they kept island hopping, and they landed on the western coast of South America. And you have those people now marrying and mixing with those people in the Andes and those areas.
And they definitely came from both directions, huh?
Yes. No, it gets worse. There's also another group. It's R11R1 DNA sequence, and we found them, and they crossed over earlier on, even before the Vikings in areas, and that's Indo-European, and they crossed over, and we find that DNA in eastern Canada, in the areas of Nova Scotia, and that region, even further to the north. With that said, we're not done with more. Sorry. With that said,
please.
we also found a sequence of those from sub-Saharan Africa that seem to predate the arrival of the Portuguese in Brazil, and we find that at parts of Amazonia. So there's people coming from 4 different directions.
Which the sub-Saharan Africans could have been the traders that were transporting cocaine back to Egypt.
Absolutely, could be.
So just a possibility. I'm just,
yeah.
Not that I want to die on that hill. I'm just saying that.
Does that help,
Frederick? We won't quote you on it, Matt.
Yes, very much so.
I'm just sorry for
Thank you.
Pure speculation.
Yeah.
But they're since it was coming from so many different directions, it was pretty clear because there was an experiment where they built their raft and crossed the Pacific from the islands and made it to South America in a pretty reasonable amount of time. It only took a little while, and they're able to do it purely using technologies they believe Polynesians and
How many grad students did we lose doing that experiment?
None, but it was all grad students. It was all white grad students doing it. I think it was done in the 70s. I forget exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like Thor Heyerdahl or something in the
I think that's what it is. Yeah. He built a raft.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was a raft that was supposed to be representative of what the Polynesians used to populate the Pacific.
Yeah, I'm listening to a lot of material on language, just stuff you find on YouTube. It's a lot of fun, really engaging stuff out there. And I remember hearing about the fact that some Vikings made their asses over to, ostensibly, perhaps even as far as, kind of Nova Scotia area.
There's archaeological evidence that they did indeed land and set up a settlement.
But they didn't last long. They definitely got iced out real quick within a few years.
It was a place where they had all their wine. you had the king of Denmark all upset in his letters, his correspondence about these Vikings who had all this great vintage, and he wanted to know where they're growing it all. In his letters, and it was like a trade secret. So, and wine from Vinland, right?
Vinland, that's right. Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence for that, and the use of iron also that is found extent, even going further in from Vinland, Nova Scotia area, evidence of iron being used.
I think. Please. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh no, I think the thing I was listening to, the material, was a counterfactual about how if those Vikings had actually settled for good and kind of made, integrated somewhat with the Native Americans, that would have given them enough time to get used to those animal-borne diseases that wiped them all out ahead of time, and even kind of get horses back over to North America and domesticate them, and that it could have been a very, very different story by the time the conquistadors came over, or by the time that the other British Europeans came over.
That's true. They weren't there long enough to establish the use of horses or to contribute to the inoculation from these diseases. Yeah, good point. Very good point. So we're all mutts when it comes to our DNA sequences. Anybody who's gone through and had their DNA done, we realize, wow, we're not really pure anything. And the further back you go, the more mixed we are. And hey, oh well. But the beauty is that when it comes to people telling stories, we tell stories for various reasons. What I didn't go into is why tell these stories. I didn't have time to elaborate. Why would you tell stories like this? Just because it preserves a memory? what do we get out? I mean, there's various lessons that we gain from these stories. And that is the big one seems to be, you better be good or you're going to get wiped out. Hey, sorry, it's a pretty basic one. You know, you better be righteous. You know, it's almost a cosmological Santa, you know. He knows if you're naughty or nice.
Well, stop reading so much to get wiped out.
Yeah, keeping a list, checking it twice, knows if we're naughty or nice. And we've been really bad, you know. It's, hey, we get the plague, and now we get the great flood, you know. And of course, what's worse than, I think go into this, what's worse than a flood? A fire. And so many of these cultures will have a fire, but oftentimes the fire one is reserved for what's coming up next. So that's a whole nother interesting theme. So, you know, in the end, there's going to be a fire, and there's many stories that go there. Even Zoroastrianism goes there, you know. Fires of the Ahura Mazda, right?
Water behind us, fire in front of us.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Push everybody into the lake of fire, and those who are good are not burned. Yeah, so I mean, you have, you know, so you have that too, and you know, that keeps us. Another one though is about what? Okay, we covered the naughty or nice theme. What's another possible theme for some of these?
Reading too much.
Huh?
Overpopulation.
Overpopulation. Yeah. Have you noticed that one, right?
Yeah. That's the basis for all our problems.
Too many people. It's found in a lot of traditions that are, that's a real concern for us even today, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, let's not, so what's a lesson we get from this? Let's not have too many kids. I don't know. You know, let's not overbreed, or something will happen to us. Or maybe it's a lesson, it's a realistic one, where they realize when various tribes, they had too many people, there's not enough food to sustain them.
Yep.
You know? I hear music, or is this me?
I hear water.
It's the spirits.
Spirits talking. So what's another theme, though? What's something else that we learned from this? Other than punitive and overpopulation.
Animals.
Birds?
Huh? Birds? What about this? Huh? What'd you say, Sonia? I'm sorry.
The great beaver and raven.
Okay, so you have a great beaver, you have a great raven. So a raven is, of course, that which is intelligent.
Yeah.
You know, cunning.
Yes.
Maybe the
Rebirth.
idea that we need to be discerning.
All
we have
of
to
these
be
Noahs were
wise.
good at carpentry. Right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to build a boat. That's pretty skilled.
Oh,
Yeah.
Awful lot of them have the
Innovation.
animals 2x2.
Yeah, you notice that one too, right?
Yeah.
And even ones that are way off in northern Canada.
That male-female principle there with the pairs, I guess.
Yeah. So that would be a universal idea, right?
Is
Yeah, I
there
can't
a
avoid that one.
correlation between the mythology of the 2x2 and the beginning of herding, where they start to pay attention to the fact that all the animals, you know, the breeding, you need a male and a female in order to make this thing happen?
Animal husbandry.
I have a question for you.
It's a logical deduction, right? That everybody's going to go, well, you're not going to do you know, a male to male animal probably will not produce much, or female to female.
James.
So yeah, so they do, yeah.
James,
So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hey, be careful. Haven't you seen Jurassic Park?
The guy with his 4 sons that was hiding with his great flood, then the flood went away. How did they reproduce? It was all male.
I'm sorry, what was all male? What?
The guy with his 4 sons, and they were so in a reed or something or other, the giant reed.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm hearing it correctly. I'm sorry.
About the myth with the man and the righteous man and his 4 sons, and then there was some sort of magical way they repopulated the earth, but wouldn't it have been easier to just take women?
You're talking about because I mean, I know the Adam and Eve song. It's not Adam and Eve song. It's the Adam and Eve story. Apparently, you have other Judeo-Christian stories that talk about that they had daughters, and they married those daughters. And there's a reference in Genesis where Cain goes off and he marries. So that's in the book of Genesis. So he marries somebody. So if you have a certain amount of people, where are these? Now, I don't have an answer for this. Let's go here. What they will do is, what do you do if you start with a male, female, and they have kids, and you're worried about them marrying each other? Do you have the brother-sister stories that we talked about, even in these myths? You know, something's going to happen genetically. It's just like Spain, you know, it's not going to work out with the royalty. Too much intermarriage is not good. What do you do with a gene pool? And various societies came up with an idea. I think I talked about this in our public talks. And that is, what will happen is they'll invent these other people that are mysterious spirit-like people that are out there that intermarry and be part of the gene pool. And so the indigenous peoples of the Americas, especially in the Southwest, you know, to deal with the situation, you marry the daughters or the sons of the Mirage people. You know, saying, okay, so you know, because you want to mix things up. In sub-Saharan Africa, you had this mixture also, especially in East Africa, where they had their own, they're called the forest dwellers. And so, you know, that'll mix up the gene pool. In early Middle Eastern perspectives, before they became more autonomous, you have the jinn, which are this in-between race. And in some cases, they were used as an extra race to mix things about. And we see some earlier stories where a person is half jinn and half human. So, and then of course, you have a reference to this, we talked about this, the Nephilim, right? In the book of Genesis, where the obviously the sons of God went into the daughters of men. So this is how they deal with the diversity. So that's your question, Sonia. Sometimes it's inferred that there is, if they're all males, there's some mystical female force out there that they intermarry with, and it's kind of contrived, honestly. You come up with it. You know?
It kind of reminds me of the idea of heroes from Greek mythology.
Yeah, the heroes too. Yes. Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to put together maybe a forest dweller or Mirage people dating site. You can't find anybody.
I'm single.
You know, it's like join this Mirage group, and you'll find the perfect mate. Sorry.
Trying to think of what that app's going to be called. Something sounds like Tinder. I don't know. Something stupid.
You know, mix the gene pool a little bit more. You know, we need it.
We need to produce some Star Lords.
Yeah, right. We need some divine. Yeah, we're all getting a little crazy down here.
Yeah. Although I hear the Nephilim website's not very good.
Okay.
The bad joke. All right. Any other thoughts? Sorry. All right. Yeah.
Do you have any really good resources to recommend reading wise? Like those letters from what you said. Oh, like the Danish king that was like, "What's up with the wine?" I don't know, like really interesting stuff that you enjoyed reading.
On this topic?
Yeah, any of this related stuff, I guess.
You know, it's so funny. I was really boring about it. What I did to create this talk is I went into research into each individual legend as a primary source, and I skipped the secondary sources. And cobbled this together. I thought it'd be more fun to do that because I sometimes get leery of secondary source. I didn't want to be biased, so I thought, you know, I'm going to do this unfiltered. But there are a lot of books. With that said, good scholastic books, good articles on JSOR that are on this. But what they'll do is they already have their perspective in mind, and they'll use the sources to support whatever they're trying to prove. And I thought what I'm going to do today is just kind of do the open, I'm going to tell you the stories and then let you kind of put the pieces together yourself. With that said, I think now it's time to take the next step. And it would be good. There's quite a few articles. I don't know it off the top of my head, but there's not much there anyway. There's some good sources, obviously. Yeah, anybody else know a good source? Some good question. No. Yeah, yeah. So make sure it's a good academic source. So look for ones that come from reputable universities or university presses. That'd be good. The ones that are peer reviewed. Also, I did use. I don't know where I put it, but I did use a few sources on indigenous peoples' oral history stories. I did use some of those, and I transcribed a few of those too. So, and that's found also on academic sites, and sometimes it's found online. And yeah, and it's all there. Sometimes you can just actually listen to them from that group talking, or saying it verbally, telling their stories. So, in fact, also the other fun part is, this is called cheating. I for 5 years, my office mate was Comanche Indian, and we shared an office together, and he had his whole library there, and I used it, and I had used this for an earlier talk, because I've done this talk before, and I grabbed all his sources, because it was in my office, and his office, and yeah, he taught at Cal State Fullerton, so I used all those sources too. So proud of being a proud Comanche, and he he actually teaches on that topic he teaches at Cal State Fullerton, but he teaches at a community college. They're having him form an indigenous studies group, and he's teaching in the I think the Orange County area. I can find out if you're interested. He's teaching classes on this topic. It's really a hot topic.
Yeah,
indigenous studies.
Yeah, well, you got more of these lectures coming up. David, I don't know, David Ferrer, he's the one who invited me to this.
Yes. Yes.
I've so enjoyed it. So yeah, I definitely want to catch your next lectures. So in some form or other, yeah. Well, wherever you can release that kind of info, I'll try to catch that.
Actually, I have a mailing list. If you want to be on it, you can send me your email, and I'll add you to it, and it goes out once a month.
Oh, should I put it in the chat?
Yeah, you can. And we have the lectures twice a month on the first and fourth Wednesday. This month we're having the next one on the 29th, so it's actually 3 weeks apart, but that's an unusual situation. But normally it's the second and fourth. But yeah, send me your email and I'll add you to the list. Thank you. I see it. Beautiful. And then I send it out once a month. So the next one's on the 29th. And you can follow me on Facebook, and I put all the information out in the ipso facto page, and our group, and my personal ones, my personal profile as well. And I can friend you if you want.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, and then you can follow me, and I can add you to my group.
I don't have many friends, so please get over here.
Yeah, no, cool. I will be happy to do that. And I will also add you to the list. And anyone else who wishes to be on that list, it's once a month that I send it out. And
can I be your friend, Terry?
Oh, you already are.
Yeah.
Okay, just in case. Just making sure.
I'm on the list, right, Terry?
Let me see. Let me find out. Sonia, what's your last name again? Sorry, I know it's on the screen, but I'm on a different screen right now.
Meadows?
Meadows, that's right. Okay, let me just go back.
I don't know how I knew that. Just
intuition.
I don't think
it was that third option you were talking about.
So Sonia, send me your email as well. Anyone else who wants to be on the list, feel free to send it to me, and I will add you.
The footwear store?
Oh, she does have shoes.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, okay. I will find Frederick Hallas. How do you say it?
Hallas, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. I'm going to end the recording, everybody.
All right.
So we can continue on, but I'm just going to end the recording.
Okay.
So.
Okay.